So another thing that is part of the house cleaning before we get to the actual cases is something that I think is a sensitive topic. And I want to start with you, Tiffany, because you remember 2 years ago you were very excited because Ketanji Brown Jackson had been appointed to the Supreme Court. I think you knew her in college. There was a reunion. You didn't show up to the reunion. You were upset. You had a fangirl feelings for her. You wanted to get photos. All your other friends had photos. And so last year I said, how did she do? All right. So this year I want to ask something else, which is that she ends this term in a flourish because there is an opinion written by Amy Coney Barrett in which she is indelicate in describing Ketanji Brown Jackson. You know, let's put this, it doesn't seem like a sisterhood. If you read the opinion, it seemed harsh. It seems like she was questioning her understanding of the Constitution and constitutional history. And so is this a dust-up? Is this something, I know that, and I had Sonia Sotomayor on this stage years ago, and she and I talked about how Justice Scalia and Ginsburg were buddies and they'd go to the opera together. And so didn't agree on anything, right? So that's possible. And so are people making too much of a big deal? Are they actually playing tennis when they're not squabbling? Is there a history, maybe Bill can help out, of justices throughout the history that everyone hated? This is an area that, Jeff, you may know something about, that simply they couldn't stand each other.
I mean, I will say that Justice Scalia was known for his very sharp tongue, but he was also known for being extremely charming. And so, you know, I don't know that necessarily had an enormous impact on his relationships on the court. But I would say that there are so few of them that I can imagine that just from the perspective of being human, that they likely try to get along, but they're dealing with issues that are so important that sometimes you can imagine that feelings get frayed and harsh things get said personally, and obviously this time on paper, because the issues are so critical. And the case that Thane's talking about is the birthright citizenship case. And in that one, when you look at that dust-up between the two of them, it kind of made me think of a couple of things. One, you're seeing various members of the court are willing to mix it up with each other, even within the conservative majority at times. It doesn't tend to get that personal. This one was pretty personal and was shocking to me, but I don't know why it's happening other than perhaps the importance of the issues that we're dealing with. But what I will say is, given what actually was said, Justice Barrett essentially said that Justice Jackson doesn't really know the law that well. And Justice Jackson essentially said, you guys are hiding behind boring legalese in order to give the president the right to do whatever he wants to do. And as Michael Jordan said, she took that personally. And so, what I would say about
You mean
that,
Amy Coney Barrett took that
did.
personally?
She did, yeah. So what I would say about that is it was impolite. Both sides, they were impolite to each other, but when I was reading Barrett and then reading Jackson, I kind of felt about Barrett, that old cliche, a hit dog will holler. One of the things that Barrett is concerned about is the perception that the court is far too ideologically aligned with the Republican
Meaning
Party.
public legitimacy.
Yes, yes. And so I think that this spat and her response to what Jackson said is perhaps rooted to some degree in that
Quickly,
concern.
Jeff, anything about, given your own work with the Constitution, at the Constitution Center, are there sort of legendary battles between justices that we should know about?
There are, and last night we had a great Supreme Court review at the National Constitution Center. I was moderating, I was in your role, and I asked Jess Braven from the Wall Street Journal and Jan Crawford.
He was here last year in your seat.
He's just great.
He's great.
And I was in your seat, and Jan Crawford was in Neal's seat.
That's how things work out.
And at the Constitution Center, of course, I'm not allowed to have any opinions of my own, which is an incredibly liberating thing to do. And I said, Justice Jackson has just accused the majority of creating a zone of lawlessness which represents an existential threat to the rule of law. And the 6 conservatives respond through Justice Barrett that Justice Jackson's views are not rooted in 200 years of precedent and the Constitution. Who's right? And Jess Braven and Jan Crawford said that they both believe that they're right. And Justice Jackson absolutely believes that this is a zone of lawlessness, and the majority is convinced that it's Justice Jackson who's threatening the rule of law. What does history teach us? Yes, we have been here before. There have been times when the court has been so polarized that each side accuses the other of complete lawlessness. After the Civil War, Congress literally reduces the size of the court to prevent Andrew Johnson the ability to make any appointments. Then Grant comes in, they give him 2 more seats. He appoints 2 judges to overturn the Gold Clause cases, which is the Roe v. Wade of its day, and having just struck down the president's ability to borrow money for the Civil War, they then reversed themselves in a year and uphold it. And the dissenters go ballistic, and Chief Justice Chase says this is lawlessness, it's just pure politics, it's kind of Dobbs redux. During World War II, Robert Jackson goes over to Nuremberg, he's the Nazi prosecutor, and Hugo Black is sniping at him from the court and accusing him of being political, and Jackson says Black is evil, and they are absolutely at each other's throats. And then Tiffany's right to mention Justice Scalia, because it's clear that Justice Scalia's invective alienated Justice O'Connor and the moderates. And Scalia would said that O'Connor's opinions cannot be taken seriously. O'Connor responded, "Sticks and stones can break my bones." That's probably not true. And then she voted with the liberals and moderates much more consistently when Scalia was really pushing her. And think about some of Scalia's rhetoric. In the Obergefell case, he said, "This opinion is so bad it makes me want to put my head in a bag and vomit," he said at some point. He accused the dissenters of mistaking a Kulturkampf for a fit of spite, which is terrifying until you look it up, a culture war. And he was very unbounded in his
So
what's unusual, though, is not the rhetoric, it's the substance of the fact that Justice Jackson at least honestly believes, because she's told us very clearly in her opinions, that she thinks that the president has become a king, the founders' worst fears have been recognized, and this is a zone of lawlessness. But then I would say that Justice Kagan doesn't agree. She's not joining these.
Well, let me just say before we move on, there is something else that should be said about Justice Jackson, which I did not know until I saw it last week. You know, this is her 2nd year, and she actually, apparently in oral arguments, and you would know this because you appeared before her, actually speaks more at oral arguments than most of the other judges. She's authored more dissenting opinions that are of a fiery tone. I couldn't believe it. I read that Roberts didn't even write a dissenting opinion until he was in his 10th year, and Justice Jackson is like, she really hit the ground running. Neal, do you have anything?
Yeah, so Justice Jackson is by far the most vocal person on the court. She had 79,000 words at oral argument last term. The next highest justice was 53,000. I think the fewest, Justice Thomas, at something like 7,000.
Young people today.
Yeah, so she has a very different approach to the bench than other people. I would say the Chief Justice and Justice Kagan have a similar, not necessarily a similar jurisprudential view, but a similar view of the role of the justice, which is try and build consensus, don't write separate opinions. Justice Kagan's written almost no separate opinions, as has the Chief. Don't talk a lot at argument, ask a few pointed questions. Justice Jackson is doing something very different. And her questions are marvelous. I mean, you know, like I spent years I've been involved in every affirmative action case for 25 years. But what she said in the SFFA versus Harvard argument, you know, and I won't take time to do it here, but was just such a brilliant line of questioning. So she does bring this interesting perspective. There's one other thing I just want to say about this whole question about Justice Barrett and Justice Jackson and what happened last week. I do think there's a gendered component to this in the media, because as Jeff says, like, you know, there have been justices who've used far, far harsher rhetoric in other cases, and it hasn't gotten the same attention as this has. And so, you know, my strong hunch is those 2 justices get along just fine. They're in it for the long haul for 30 or 40 years, and they know that.
All right, let's start.
And you know, when I think Blackmun's papers came out, it became clear that Scalia lost a lot of majorities because he was so snarky.
Well, what Jeff said is that he lost O'Connor all the time.
Yeah, but
Which is the same thing.
that's true. That's true. But there are a lot of major cases in which he initially had the majority opinion,
and he lost it.
and he was so snarky, and he lost it.
All right.
So, and one other thing, and there, Justice Jackson is in the line of people like Justice Rehnquist originally, Justice Thomas, where you're kind of at the margin of the court, and you're really pushing for the